Ciao a tutti, mi chiamo Charlotte e oggi vi parlerò del futuro semplice in italiano. So today everyone, we're going to look at the future tense, the simple future tense if you like, in Italian. That means when there's a tense that has semplice written after it, it means there's just like one word that you conjugate rather than like a verb tense that has composto written after it, okay? So this is used to talk about anything that will happen in the future. Allora, per esempio, tutto andrà bene. Everything will be fine. Andrà tutto bene, you might hear. Everything will be okay. That's using the verb andare in the future tense. It will be, everything will be okay. Andrà tutto bene. You might have seen that if you were following the Italian news during the COVID era, when people were putting little arcobaleni, rainbows, out on their balconies to show support for the health service in Italy. So this is an example of how you would use it, which is slightly different to English. So quando sarà possibile, when it will be possible, as opposed to when it is possible in English. Quando sarà possibile, andrò in Italia. When it will be possible, I will go to Italy. Andrò in Italia. Quando sarà possibile, when it will be possible. So in English you might say, when it is possible, I will go to Italy. So you sort of you're using the present tense, when it is possible, rather than when it will be. So try practicing using this future, simple future tense in both clauses of your sentences for something that will take place, or that you hope will take place. You might have this sentence paired with words like probabilmente, or spero che, probably, or I hope that, that kind of thing, okay? But there are other uses of the Italian future tense, and they might be a little different from what you might expect. But they do correspond with English phrases if you're an English native speaker, so that might help. But today we're just going to look at 20 verbs, which hopefully are all different. Credo di sì, I think so. So common verbs, 20 common verbs in the future tense. I've put the little subject pronoun next to them, and all we're going to do is identify the verb and change them into the future tense. Okay? Il futuro semplice. Andiamo. So here we have my board. In fact, before we do that, we might actually look at how you conjugate regular verbs, because we will see some irregular verbs. But regular verbs follow these kind of patterns, so let's have a look at those. Excuse all the scribbles. I'm trying to use the back of the paper that I use on my flip chart so that I don't waste paper unnecessarily. So let's go a little bit closer. So here we have a regular ARE verb, for example. Parlare. Sorry, it's a bit boring, but it's a very good one to practice with. Parlare. I've already filled in some of the endings which follow the stem. So parlare is an ARE verb. It has ARE at the end of the stem. Everything that comes before the ending is the stem. And that's the same for all three of these verbs on here. But let's have a look at how you write and pronounce them. So parlerò, parlerai, there's something missing there. So what's the missing one? Oh, aspetta un attimo, che cerco, che trovo la penna giusta, la penna blu. So ero, erai, era. Okay, so we got these little accents. So we've got o and a. First person and third person singular. So you add ERO, ERAI and ERA to the ending of the first three conjugations to make it the future tense. So you take a verb like parlare, to speak, and you take off the ending are, non c'è più questo, e aggiungiamo questo, per esempio. Parlerò, erò. So take any ARE verb and you can add era to the ending on the basis that it's probably right. If it's not irregular, it'll have that ending. I will speak. Parlerò con la mia sorella, o parlerò con mia sorella domani. Parlerò con mio zio tra qualche settimana. I will speak with someone in a few weeks or tomorrow. Something that will happen, but not now, in the future. Just to make something clear, in Italian, for the near future, you can just use the present tense. Parlo con lei domani. Parlo con lui tra qualche settimana, for example. So it's actually easier than you think, but because you can always revert to the present tense. That's not a problem in Italian. But if you're learning the future, you're talking about something that will happen later on, or you think will happen, you hope will happen maybe, the future tense is useful. Ero, erai, a and an I make an I sound, and then when you get to the third person, era. We'll see something which might help you remember that ending with an A later on. So these are the little accents that go from there to there, top left to bottom right. I'm trying to think what they're called, grave accents. So what they do is they kind of clip the sound of the vowel. So parlerò instead of parlerò. Parlerà becomes parlerà. Okay? So you see them on the first and third person singular, on some of them, okay? Even on the irregular ones, which we'll see in the examples. Then we have eremmo, eremmo, with just one M. If there's a double M, it becomes the present conditional. I would speak as opposed, we, this is the we form, noi parleremo con lui tra qualche mese, okay? We will speak to him or her, if you like, in a few months, sometime in the future. So if there's a double M, it's the conditional present. If it's a single M, it's the future. I have to check that sometimes because they sound similar, but one M versus two M's, emmo, parleremo, as opposed to parleremo. Okay, so there's a double pronunciation of the double M. Here we have the single one, but they look and sound quite similar to a non-native Italian speaker. Parlerò, parlerai, parlerà. Accento, accento. Non ci sono accenti qua. There's no accents in these plural conjugations. So what would this be then? We've got parleremo, parleranno, eranno, eremmo. So the MO ending might look familiar actually for noi verbs, because all noi present tense verbs end in iamo, so they've already got an M and an O. And this might look kind of like the present tense for loro conjugations because it's got an N and an O at the end. Parlano, parliamo. So there's a little clue in the structure of how they're written, to how, which subject pronoun they're agreeing with. Here we need to do something which is this. Parlerete. Now in the void form in the present tense that would be parlate. You keep the A from the are ending and you add a T and an E. But here we've got ER, ETE. So that's happening in all of these. There's an E and an R. And then there's an O, I, A, which actually looks quite similar, if you took away the accent, to the present tense endings of parlo, parli, so there's an I at the end of parli, the two form present tense, parla, lui, lei, parla. Okay, so that's quite similar, that might help you remember. Parleremo, parlerete, parleranno. Double N there, parleranno. Okay, so there's an ER and then an O, AI, A, EMO, ETE, A, double NO. I know that's quite a lot to take in, but the endings for regular ERE verbs are basically, they're the same. Prendere, to take. Prenderò, I will take. Prenderai, you will take. Prende. Okay, so the third person here has an ERA ending. Prenderà. Lui, lei, prenderà. He or she will take something. The bus, that car, whatever you want to end it with. It's something that will happen in the future. Erete, just the same as the voi form here in the ARE verb. Prenderete, and then we've got the voi loro form here without the ending for the future. It's just the same as this. Prenderanno. Loro prenderanno una pausa quando sarà possibile. Okay, so the subject is not always the same in both or several clauses of a sentence in Italian. When it will be possible, they will take a break. That might be in tomorrow, or it might be in 5 years. Okay, but it's in the future, so we use the future tense in both or however many clauses there are in the sentence. Okay, slightly different here. So instead of having this ER plus an ending, ER plus an O, I, A, whatever, or A, I, A, E, M, O, E, T, E, A, N, N, O. It's slightly different. So we keep an IR, sentir, O. There's an O at the end with an accent down. Sentirai. So that looks similar, apart from this bit, which differs from the other two. Sentirà, sentiremo, sentirete. So the only difference with IRE verbs in the future tense, in the future tense conjugation, is that they have IR and then the ending. Okay, but all of that makes up the ending for future tenses of IRE verbs, if they're regular. Sentirano. Aspetta, sentirano? Let me just double check. Sì, sentirano. Sometimes I have to check, because it's confusing. You can't always remember them. But on my handout, because there's so many tenses in Italian and so many kind of conjugations, sometimes it's just worth checking. And things might come naturally when you speak, but then when you write them, if you don't write very often, given that we all text and type quite a lot these days, and when you're writing something down, it can maybe make you question things, but just check. Go on wordreference.com and you'll find the endings. If you put in any Italian verb, select Italian conjugations, and then you can put these in if you like. These are regular. These are the endings of the verb. They tell you what type of verb they are. Take off the endings and add the future endings to them. There you have it. So there's accents on the first and third person singular, and then the ARE and ERE verbs have this ER plus the extra ending, which might look familiar based on previous knowledge of the present tense. But when you get to IRE verbs, the first part after the stem changes to IR. Sentirò, dormirò, domani dormirò, tutta la giornata, I'll sleep all day tomorrow. Okay, so with that in mind, let's have a look at our Futuro Semplice, gli esercizi. Let's look at the exercises, okay? Because this is where you really get to know which verbs are regular and which, how well you know the conjugations. So here we have portare. So that could be to carry or to wear. Two slightly different meanings there. In the io form, so let's put port, that's the root or the stem of the verb, and then it's a nice regular one, porterò. Porterò quel roba blu. I will wear that blue dress. Parlare, well, we've just seen that in the to form. Put the stem down, par, e, so this is the bit that you're adding to the stem. Erai. Parlerai agrees with the to. You will speak to someone. Mangiare, loro. Okay, let's have a look. We've got the verb stem, mangi. Oh, scusa. Mangi, because I comes before ARE, but we have to check the conjugation mangiaranno. Let's have a look, because mangieranno I want to put an I in there, but because there's already an E-R-A-N-N-O in the loro ending, I'm going to just show you how you can check. So go on to something like word reference, which is what I'm looking at now. Italian to English, select that and put in mangiare, a verb that has a vowel before the ending, because sometimes that can change the conjugation. So you look there. Okay, so because an I makes a soft sound, manjo, mangi, manja, a G followed by an I or a G followed by an E makes the same sound. G is a soft G sound. If we kept in the I there, it would be mangierano, but we don't need that there. To retain the soft G, we can just add E-R-A-N-N-O. So that's the kind of thing that when you're kind of an intermediate or a higher level learner, you'll question and it's worth checking. It doesn't make a difference in spoken Italian. Mangerano, mangierano, mangerano. It makes a little bit of a difference, but just check if you're not sure, like I did then. Wordreference.com is a very useful resource, very reliable. Okay, now we have the verb andare, which means to go. This one means to bring or to carry, to bring, or to wear, like to wear clothes. Porto or porterò una roba blu, for example. Parlare is to speak, mangiare is to eat, andare means to go. This is a useful one, and that's the one that you saw or you heard in andrà tutto bene. Everything will be okay. And I think I've put this in the third person singular, which is the same as in that example. Andrà tutto bene. So instead of adding ERA, that's an ARE verb, isn't it? But it's also a highly irregular verb, very common but highly irregular. Instead of adding ERA, non si fa. You don't do that. Instead you use andrà. So that is an irregular verb in the future tense and various other tenses. Andrà tutto bene. It will go well, everything. But you can also use it for Luigi andrà a Parigi tra qualche settimana. You can use it for he, she, or one will go, but you can use it with things like tutto, everything, or la gente andrà qualche parte. So people will go everywhere, because la gente, people, in Italian is singular, so the verb that follows it is singular. Okay. Comprare, okay, that's a nice regular ARE verb. So it's in the lui, lei. Compra. Okay, so that's the stem of the verb. Compra. What happens now then? Third person. So it's a third person singular, it's regular. Era. Comprerà. Sometimes you have so many syllables in a verb that you think, oh, where's the stem? But just think back to everything that comes before the three letters at the end, and then you'll find the stem. The only time that might change is when you've got things like an I after a G, or an I after a C, which, like here, we've got an E after a G. That keeps the soft kind of J sound. So you don't necessarily need the I. But if you're speaking mangiano, mangerò, you don't necessarily know without checking the written form whether it has the I in it or not. But generally, take it back to everything that comes before the last three letters, okay? And then you'll find the stem. Finire, that's an IRE verb. So the endings normally have ER and then a letter or several letters, unless it's an IRE verb. So here we've got fin, there's the stem, IR, fin instead of ER, like here. Finirò. We've still got the accent, so that's a clipped kind of pronunciation, it's short. Finirò I compiti la settimana prossima. I'll do the homework next week. I will do it, but next week, not now. Okay, so here we've got one which might look a bit different. So dire means to say or to tell. So dir, we keep that stem, but instead of I-R-O, like here, or I-R-A-I, we don't add another I-R because it's an irregular verb. Instead of dirai, we have simply dirai. Dirai. Let's go down a bit. Okay. What's this next one here? So that might not be very clear on the board. Looks a bit more like an R than a C. Capire means to understand. It's one of the two verbs which means to understand. Conoscere is the other one. It's in the voi form. So let's see what happens here. Capire. Okay, so there's the stem of the verb, and the ending is capirete, which is actually regular. Irete. Ete sounds a bit like ite. It's got the te and a vowel before it, which is a bit like the present tense, voi capite, but instead it's got this additional ir before it. I-R-E-T-E. Capirete. You guys will understand. Now we've got something a bit more difficult. Già! Ma che cos'è? Che cosa abbiamo qua? We've got a reflexive verb, divertirsi, to enjoy yourself or to have a good time. So here we've got an infinitive verb with a reflexive pronoun at the end. That's how they look in their infinitive form in Italian. What you do is you need to know the reflexive pronoun. This is voi, so the reflexive pronoun for voi is vi. Now we're going to put this into the future tense. So, divert, that's the divertirsi. You always put the pronoun first, add a space, because that's different from the conjugation of the verb itself. The verb itself, divertirete. I have to just double check, you know. Divertirete. Esatto. Vi divertirete alla festa di Capodanno. You will enjoy yourself at the New Year's party, New Year's Eve party. So that's a reflexive verb there. So what that entails is putting a reflexive pronoun before the conjugation. Look those up if I haven't done them already. Maybe I have. Forse sì, forse no, non ricordo. Then you need to know your reflexive pronouns. And then you just conjugate the rest of the verb, that bit, as if it's a normal IRE verb. Divertirete. Now we have prendere here, but I feel like we've already had that. Oh no, we've had other P verbs. Portare, parlare, prendere. Okay, so prendere is, oh, I know where we saw it, on the previous page with the regular conjugations of verbs. So, prendere is to take. Noi prend. Do you remember what the ending is? Eremo, with one M, because it has, if it has two M's, it's the conditional, present conditional. Okay, we will take. Now here's another verb starting with P. Let's go up a bit for this. This is a modal verb. I love these because you can follow them with infinitives, but they're also very servile. Verbi servili, which basically means modal verbs. Very useful. So, now this is a little bit irregular. Okay, so I'll give you what this means to be able to or can. We will be able to is what it translates as. Potremo. So instead of poteremo, see, instead of poteremo, we just miss out the E, eremo, which would be a regular future ending for noi verbs, and it becomes potremo. Potremo andarci se sarà possibile. We will be able to go there if it will be possible. Okay? Rivedersi. I think I've seen this. Why did I put this in there? Ah, I wanted to mention a song, that's why. There's a song called Amici miei. Amici miei, stasera non verrò, non aspettartemi. Stasera, amici miei, andrò dalle. Check it out. It's all in the well, mostly in the future tense. And I was thinking of doing my febbraio video on that song. So that song has lots of future tense conjugations in the io form. But there's a section in it, or a sentence in it, with rivedersi. Rivedersi. So vedere is to see. See makes it reciprocal. So the pronoun here is reciprocal in its kind of use, in its purpose, but it's the same essentially as the reflexive mi, ti, si, ci, vi, and si. Okay, so like we saw with divertirsi. So we're going to have the pronoun ci here. That should actually say noi. Ci is the pronoun that goes with noi for reflexive or reciprocal verbs. Then we take the verb vedere, vedere. Rivedere is to see again. So that little ri means again, or another time, or redo, re-see, depending on the meaning of the verb and how it translates into English. So ci rivedremo. I feel like this is slightly irregular. Rivedremo. Sì. So instead of vederemo, rivedremo. Similar to up there. Well, the same as that ending actually. Now we've got dare. Darò. Yeah, so this is an irregular verb. Often irregular in lots of different tenses. For example, in the present tense, do. Is that irregular? Not really, because you take off the ARE and you add an O. Often irregular. Can't think of all the verb. The thing to know is that verbs are not always irregular in every tense. Sometimes they might follow the regular pattern in a certain tense, other times they might not. So an irregular verb doesn't always mean that it's irregular in every tense. So here we've got dare, which means to give. So this is darò. A-R-O. Okay, so this is irregular because the regular ending for ARE verbs would be to take off are, così, and to, oh, that's French. Pardonnez-moi. Sorry about that. Oh, that's also French. Pardon. Pardon. So if dare were regular, we'd add ER-O. Darerò. Ma non si fa. No. È irregolare. Sì. Darò. Così. Now this one is highly irregular. I remember now that what I did when I was planning this is I put all the irregular ones at the bottom of the list. So here we are, things that buck the trend. Andiamo. So venire, this is very irregular because the stem changes to something that you probably won't, maybe you've seen before. Verai. However, that ending and that ending, even though the stem changes, or isn't the same as the regular ones that you'll learn, ero, erai, this bit here might look familiar because it's an O or an I at the end. O is a bit similar at the end of present tense verbs. I is what you get at the end generally of present tense to form verbs. That's for io, that's for tu. But this bit, super different. So, io verrò domani. I will come tomorrow. Okay? Tu verrai lunedì. You will come on Monday. You will come. It's in the future. Volere, dovere. Here we had potere, which is a modal verb, and here we have the other two. To want and to have to, or must. Sense of obligation with that. So this is the lui, lei. Oh, aspetta. I'm not sure. I can't think of it. Scusa. Scusa, sì. Yeah, so these two I get confused over because they both begin with a V, and their stems their irregular stems in the future look kind of similar and sound a bit similar. This is the difference. So you keep the O sound. Vor, double R, similar to that. Vorrà. So that little ending is similar to the other lui, lei forms, but this stem changes from vol to vor, and we don't add er, we just add an a. Really irregular. Strano, no? Dovere, to have to or must, in the loro form. Dovranno, dovranno. So here we keep the dov, and then instead of irano, we just add rano with a double N. Sapere in the io form, that's sap, and instead of sapero, as you might expect if you remember the ere verb endings for regular verb, ero. But this is irregular. So, sapro. These are the ones that are harder to get the hang of, but they're more common actually. Well, they're not more common, but they're very useful verbs. So I would pay particular attention to pagina 2, page 2 of this lesson, or 11 a 20 of the exercises, okay? Because they might not follow the form that you expect. Okay, now we've got back to, so this means I will know. Quando sarà possibile, that's a good little starter clause. Saprò tutto. I will know everything when it's possible. Saprò tutto. Essere, that's the auxiliary verb. So, this is already very irregular, but super common, and you will need essere and avere when you're using the combined future tenses, like I will have been. By that time, by the time I finish my masters, I will have been in Italy for 5 years. 2 years. 5 is quite a long time for a masters. I will have had all of that pizza by the time the film finishes, for example. I will have plus a past participle. That's a combined future tense where you use the auxiliary verbs essere or avere, depending on the verb that follows in the future, followed by a past participle of whatever the main verb is. So here that's the lui lei version, and this is what it looks like. That doesn't look anything like essere. Sarà. Think of che sarà, sarà. What will be, will be. Now I know that song, I think anyway, is actually talking about the Spanish que será, será. So instead of CHE we would have a QUE, and será would be será. Que será, será, whatever will be, will be. But it translates into Italian che sarà, sarà. So that's the third person singular. Sarò, sarai, sarà, saremo, sarete, saranno. Okay? Here we have avere, similar to this. It's not avero, but instead it's avrà. Oh, scusa, avrò. Io avrò. Io. That's an O there, ladies and gentlemen. If it was he, she, it would be avrà. Lui, lei. Finally, we have fare, which means to do or to make. They will do, I will do it next year. Lo farò la settimana, oh scusa, l'anno prossimo. But this is in the loro form, not the io form, so it actually, so it's an ARE verb. You might think it's fareranno, ma no, it's irregular. A little, some fewer syllables, if that makes sense. Faranno. Michele e Daniele faranno il lavoro l'anno prossimo. Lo faranno l'anno prossimo. They will do it next year. That's in the future, isn't it? So, I'm sorry to rush through that, but it's quite a busy day. I hope that makes sense. There's lots of regular verbs. What's the top from that then? There's lots of regular verbs on that list, but there's also on the last page modal verbs, a reciprocal verb with a pronoun, similar to the reflexive verb, and lots of irregular verbs which just don't follow the pattern. So go online if you're interested in talking about the future, what will happen, what you think will happen, what will probably happen. Use the future tense even in both clauses. When it will be possible, I will do this. In English we use when it is possible, I will do that. So it's like using the present then the future. But in Italian you use future. There's other ways that you use the future tense, and we'll probably see them in another video, but I'm thinking that I will probably look at Amici miei, which is a song by one of my favourite Italian singer-songwriters, Nicola Di Bari. So that's probably what we'll be looking at, and we can go back over and revisit the future tense, il futuro semplice, la prossima volta, ok? Lo rivedremo la prossima volta, ok? Quando studieremo quella canzone. We will see it when we will look at the song, ok? Grazie mille e buon anno! Alla prossima volta! Ciao!